The clock on the dashboard had just ticked past 2 a.m., and the world outside the windshield felt like it had been completely shut down. Maya gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, her knuckles turning white in the dim glow of the instrument panel. She had been driving for nearly an hour, trying to get back to the city after a long weekend trip that had drained every bit of energy she had. The heater in her old sedan was barely working, sending out weak puffs of lukewarm air that did nothing to fight the chill of the late autumn night. She let out a long yawn, blinking her eyes rapidly to keep them focused. The highway had been monotonous, an endless stretch of black asphalt lined with tall, shadowy trees that looked like silent watchers in the dark. The only sound was the steady hum of her tires rolling over the pavement and the occasional rattling noise the engine made whenever she accelerated. It was the kind of silence that makes your mind play tricks on you, making you see things in the corner of your vision that aren't really there. Just as she was beginning to think she couldn't drive another mile, a small, orange light flickered on the dashboard. The fuel gauge. Maya cursed under her breath. The needle was hovering dangerously close to the red E. She had meant to fill up before leaving her friend's house, but in the rush to beat the Sunday evening traffic, she had completely forgotten. Now, she was in the middle of nowhere, with miles of empty road stretching out in front of her. Panic started to bubble up in her chest, but she pushed it down. "Okay, don't freak out," she whispered to herself, the sound of her own voice strangely loud in the quiet car. "There has to be a station soon." 5 minutes later, a sign appeared in the distance, reflecting in her headlights. It was a rusty old billboard advertising a gas station and a convenience store at the next exit. It wasn't a major brand, and it didn't look particularly welcoming, but right now, Maya didn't care. She just needed gas. She slowed down and took the exit ramp, her car groaning slightly as she navigated the sharp curve. The gas station sat alone in the middle of a large, gravel lot. It looked like something out of an old movie, or maybe the start of a scary story she shouldn't be in. The fluorescent lights above the pumps were buzzing loudly, one of them flickering on and off with a rhythmic buzz that sounded like a dying insect. The convenience store part of the building was dark, save for a single dim light near the door, suggesting that the clerk might be asleep or that the place was simply understaffed. Maya pulled up to the pump closest to the road, trying to stay as far away from the shadows of the building as possible. She turned off the engine, and suddenly, the silence of the night rushed in to fill the void. It was heavy and pressing. She sat for a moment, taking a deep breath, looking around to make sure she was the only one there. Satisfied, she opened the door and stepped out into the cold air. The wind hit her immediately, biting through her thin jacket. She shivered and zipped it up all the way to her chin. She walked to the pump and inserted her card, her fingers fumbling slightly because of the cold. The screen beeped and flashed a message asking for her zip code, which she typed in quickly. She grabbed the nozzle and pressed the trigger, leaning against the car as the gasoline began to flow into the tank. It was quiet. Too quiet. The only sounds were the gas flowing and the rhythmic buzzing of that flickering light overhead. Maya looked at her phone, checking for messages, but there was no signal. Just a big no-service notification at the top of the screen. She sighed, putting the phone back into her pocket. That feeling of unease was creeping back. She felt exposed, standing there under the bright light while the rest of the world was dark. She felt like a bug under a microscope. She tried to distract herself by thinking about her warm bed, about a cup of hot tea she would make when she got home, about the TV show she was binge-watching. Anything to keep her mind from wandering to the scary thought of what might be lurking in the darkness beyond the light. Then, she heard the sound. It was a low rumble, growing louder by the second. Maya looked up and saw headlights approaching from the highway. A car was turning into the station. For a split second, she felt relieved. Maybe it was another traveler, someone else just stopping for gas like her, a sign of life in this lonely place. But as the car pulled in, her stomach did a nervous flip. It wasn't a family car or another tired traveler. It was a large, dark sedan with tinted windows. It didn't go to the empty pumps on the other side. It turned slowly and pulled right up to the pump directly opposite hers, blocking her view of the road. The engine idled loudly, a deep, aggressive growl that vibrated in Maya's chest. Maya instinctively moved closer to her car, putting the metal door between herself and the new arrival. She watched the car in the side mirror of her vehicle, her heart rate picking up speed. The windows were too dark to see inside. She couldn't tell how many people were in there or who they were. For a long moment, nothing happened. The car just sat there, engine running, the exhaust fumes mixing with the smell of gasoline. Then, the driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out. He was wearing a heavy jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He didn't look at Maya. He didn't look at the pump. He just stood there for a moment, stretching his arms, looking around the empty lot as if he owned it. Maya looked away, pretending to be intensely focused on the numbers ticking up on the gas pump display. She just wanted him to go away. She just wanted her tank to fill up so she could leave. But then, the back door opened, and another man got out. He was younger, thinner, dressed in dark sweatpants and a hoodie. The two men exchanged a few words that Maya couldn't hear. Then, slowly, they both turned their heads in her direction. Maya felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold wind. The man in the baseball cap smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a smile that made her feel like she was prey. He nudged the younger guy with his elbow, and they both started walking toward the store, taking a path that would bring them right past her. Maya's hands were shaking now. She gripped the gas nozzle, waiting for the click that would tell her the tank was full. Click. Finally. She quickly put the nozzle back in the pump and screwed the gas cap on. She moved to get into her car, but she froze. They weren't walking into the store anymore. They had stopped. They were standing right in the middle of the driveway, between her car and the exit. The younger man pulled out a pack of cigarettes, taking his time lighting one, the flare of the lighter illuminating his face for a brief second. The older man leaned against the metal post of the pump island next to hers, crossing his arms. "So," the older man said, his voice loud enough to cut through the buzzing of the lights. "Late night for a pretty thing like you to be out here all alone, isn't it?" Maya didn't answer. She pulled her car door open and ducked inside, slamming the lock button the instant the door was shut. She fumbled with the keys, her hands slipping because she was sweating despite the cold. She needed to start the car. She needed to get out of here. She looked through the windshield. The men hadn't moved. They were just staring at her car, grinning, smoke from the cigarette curling up into the bright, buzzing light. The older man took a step forward, right in front of her bumper, blocking her in. Maya's heart pounded against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was alone. The store was dark. There was no one to help. The terrifying reality of her situation settled over her. She wasn't just tired anymore. She was in trouble. Inside the car, the air felt heavy and still, like the calm right before a storm hits. Maya sat gripping the steering wheel so hard her fingers ached. She had managed to get the door closed, but now she felt like she was trapped inside a metal box. The engine was idling, a low vibration she could feel in the seat, but she didn't dare put the car in drive. The man standing directly in front of her bumper wasn't moving. He was just standing there, looking at the front of her car like he was inspecting it, but she knew he was actually looking at her through the windshield. Through the glass, the world outside seemed distorted. The fluorescent lights made everything look a sickly yellow color. The man in the baseball cap took a step closer to the hood of her car. He didn't seem to care that the engine was running or that she could run him over. He looked confident, like he knew she was too scared to do anything. He leaned down and tapped on the hood of the car, a loud, metallic thud that made Maya jump. "Hey!" the man shouted, his voice muffled by the glass but still clearly aggressive. "Turn it off. We just want to talk to you." Maya shook her head frantically. She pressed the lock button on the door again, even though she knew it was already locked. It was a nervous habit, a desperate need to check that the barrier between her and them was secure. She looked at the side mirror. The younger guy in the hoodie was walking around the back of her car. He was taking his time, dragging his feet, puffing on his cigarette. He disappeared from the mirror, and a second later, she saw him appear on the passenger side. Her heart was beating so fast it hurt. It felt like a drum pounding against her ribs. She reached for her phone with a shaking hand, needing to call for help. She pressed the button to wake it up. The screen lit up, but the top corner still mockingly displayed no service. She moved the phone around, holding it up against the window, but nothing changed. Just one bar that would flicker and disappear. She felt a lump form in her throat. She was completely cut off. There was a sharp knock on the passenger side window. Maya flinched and turned her head. The younger guy was standing right there, his face inches from the glass. He had the hood pulled up, casting a shadow over his eyes, but she could see his mouth. He was smiling. It was a lazy, mean smile. He tapped on the glass again, harder this time, with his knuckles. "Rat-a-tat-tat. Come on, lady," he said, mouthing the word slowly so she could read his lips through the window. "Roll it down. We just want to ask for directions." Maya shook her head again. She kept her eyes forward, refusing to look at him, refusing to engage. She knew that engaging was a mistake. If she opened the window, even a crack, there was no going back. She thought about laying on the horn, blasting the noise until someone woke up or came to see what was wrong. Her hand hovered over the center of the steering wheel. But then she looked at the man in front of her. He had his hands in his pockets, but he was standing with his legs wide apart, looking ready for anything. If she made a scene, would it make them angry? Would it make them go from scary to dangerous? Fear is a paralyzing thing. It tells you to be small, to be quiet, to invisible. Maya felt that fear washing over her in waves. She decided against the horn. She just wanted to shrink into the seat and disappear. The man on the passenger side laughed. He tapped the window one more time, leaving a smudge mark from his finger, before walking away towards the front of the car. He joined the older man, and they stood there together, looking like a wall that she couldn't get past. They were talking to each other, laughing, looking back at her car and pointing. Maya looked toward the gas station store. It was only 50 feet away. The lights were on inside. She could see shelves of chips and candy bars. Surely there was someone in there, a cashier, a security guard. She squinted, trying to see through the glass doors. There was a shape behind the counter. It looked like a person sitting on a stool. "Help me," she whispered, pressing her hand against her own window, as if telepathy could reach the person inside. Please look up. But the person behind the counter didn't move. They might have been asleep, or wearing headphones, or maybe they just didn't care. The gas station felt like a different planet, and the bubble of safety around the store didn't extend out to the pumps where Maya was parked. She realized then that she was truly alone. There were no other cars on the road. The clerk wasn't coming out. It was just her and these two men in the middle of the night. The older man in the baseball cap took a step forward. He walked right up to the driver's side window. Maya stopped breathing. She pressed her back against the door, trying to get as far away from him as the small space would allow. "Hey," he said, his voice low and rough. He tapped on the glass, right where her face was. "I know you can hear me. You're being rude. We're just being friendly. Why are you being so stuck up?" He cupped his hands around his eyes and leaned in, trying to see past the glare on the glass and into the car. Maya felt like he was looking right into her soul. She felt dirty and exposed. "Open the door," he said, the playfulness gone from his voice. He wasn't smiling anymore. "Open the door, or we'll open it for you." He rattled the door handle violently. Clunk, clunk, clunk. The locked mechanism held firm, but the sound was terrifying. Maya let out a small, involuntary sob. She put the car in reverse, ready to slam on the gas and back up over the curb, anything to get away. But she couldn't see behind her. What if she hit a pole? What if she got the car stuck? Then she would be trapped here with them for even longer. "Please," she whispered to herself, tears welling in her eyes. "Please go away." The younger guy came up to the window on the other side. He was bouncing on the balls of his feet, full of nervous energy. "Yeah, come on, open up. My friend wants to say hello." They were trapping her. It wasn't just in her head. They were on both sides of the car, blocking her in. The man in front was leaning with his whole body against the side mirror, blocking her view of the road. He was pressing his face against the glass, his breath fogging it up. "You have a nice car," the older man mumbled, his voice distorted by the glass. "Be a shame if something happened to it. Or to you." Maya squeezed her eyes shut. She couldn't look at them anymore. She wished she was at home. She wished she had never taken this trip. She wished she had just run out of gas on the highway instead of stopping here. The darkness of the night seemed to be pressing in on the car from all sides. The buzzing of the light above them sounded like a scream now. Suddenly, a bright light cut through the darkness. It wasn't from the gas station. It was from the road. A new sound joined the noise of the night. A low, rhythmic thrumming. An engine. Maya opened her eyes. Through the windshield, past the shoulder of the man leaning on her car, she saw a single headlight approaching. It was a motorcycle. It was coming off the highway exit and turning into the gas station. The two men heard it too. The younger guy stopped bouncing. The older man pulled his face away from the window and turned his head to look. The motorcycle didn't drive by. It slowed down. The rider seemed to be assessing the scene. He was taking in the two men looming over the small car, the way they were trapping it in. The motorcycle turned into the lot and headed straight for them, its engine roaring loudly, breaking the heavy, suffocating silence of the night. Maya watched the headlight grow brighter, reflecting off the side mirrors, cutting through the dark. For the first time in 10 minutes, the men standing outside her car looked unsure of themselves. They stepped back slightly, away from her doors, watching the new arrival. The sound of the motorcycle grew louder, filling the empty air with a heavy, mechanical roar that drowned out the buzzing of the gas station lights. It wasn't a high-pitched whine like a racing bike, it was a deep, rumbling growl that vibrated in the soles of Maya's feet even through the floor of the car. The single headlight cut through the darkness like a sword beam, blindingly bright, forcing the two men to shield their eyes and step back. Maya watched through the windshield, her heart still hammering against her ribs, but now the rhythm of her fear changed. She wasn't just terrified anymore, she was confused. Was this someone else coming to cause trouble, or was this a miracle the bike didn't circle around or park at a distance? Instead, the rider steered it directly into the standoff. With a precision that seemed impossible at that speed, the rider maneuvered the heavy machine right between Maya's car and the two men. The bike came to a halt just inches from where the older man had been standing, forcing him to stumble backward to avoid getting his legs crushed by the hot exhaust pipes. For a few seconds, the rider kept the engine running. The noise was deafening in the quiet night, a wall of sound that separated Maya from the men who had been trapping her. The older man in the baseball cap shouted something over the roar of the engine, waving his hands angrily, but his voice was lost. He looked small now, less threatening, overshadowed by the massive machine and the person sitting on top of it. Then, the engine cut off. The sudden silence was even louder than the noise had been. It rushed back into the space, heavy and expectant. The air smelled thickly of gasoline and hot rubber. Maya stared at the back of the rider. It was a man, clad in a worn-out brown leather jacket that looked like it had seen 1,000 miles of road. He had heavy boots on the ground, balancing the weight of the bike effortlessly. He didn't turn around to look at Maya immediately. His focus seemed entirely on the two men in front of him. The older man recovered from his surprise and stepped forward again, puffing out his chest, trying to regain the ground he had lost. "Hey!" he yelled, his voice sharp and hostile. "Watch where you're going, man. You almost hit me." The rider didn't flinch. He didn't shout back. He just sat there for a moment, calm as a rock in a rushing river. Then, slowly, he reached down and flicked the kickstand with his heavy boot. He leaned the bike onto the stand and swung his leg over the seat to dismount. He stood up and took off his gloves, tucking them into his pocket. It was a simple, mundane gesture, but there was something about the way he moved that caught Maya's attention. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't posturing or trying to look big. He just stood there, grounded and relaxed. The rider reached up and unbuckled the strap under his chin. He grabbed the sides of his black helmet and pulled it off his head. Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. She leaned forward, pressing her face closer to the steering wheel, squinting through the windshield to get a better look. The man shook his head, running a hand through his dark, messy hair. He turned slightly to look at the pump, and then his face caught the light from the flickering overhead bulb. Maya's brain short-circuited. She blinked hard, wondering if the stress of the night was making her hallucinate. She knew that face. Everyone knew that face. It was a face she had seen 100 times in movie theaters, on posters, and on television screens. But seeing it in real life, in this grimy gas station in the middle of nowhere, felt surreal. It was Keanu Reeves. He looked different than he did in the movies, tired, older, unshaven, wearing simple jeans and a t-shirt under the leather jacket. But there was no mistaking the intense gaze, the kind eyes, and the serious set of his mouth. He looked like a regular guy who just happened to be one of the most famous people on the planet. The two harassers clearly didn't recognize him, or if they did, they were too stupid to care. The younger guy in the hoodie nudged the older man, snickering. "Great," the younger one muttered. It's John Wick. Give me a break. The older man ignored the joke. He stepped right up to Keanu, getting in his face, trying to intimidate him the way he had intimidated Maya. This isn't your business, pal, the man spat, pointing a finger at the actor's chest. We were talking to the lady. Move along. Maya watched, terrified that Keanu was going to get hurt. There were two of them, and they were young and aggressive. He was alone, but as she watched, she noticed something. Keanu wasn't looking at the finger pointing at his chest. He was looking past the man, looking directly at Maya. He made eye contact with her through the glass. His expression wasn't angry or scared. It was calm. Steady. He gave the slightest, almost imperceptible nod. It was a signal, a silent message that said, I see you, and you're going to be okay. Then, he turned his attention back to the man in front of him. Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't push the guy away. He simply stepped forward, placing himself firmly between the men and Maya's driver's side door. He positioned his body in a way that created a barrier, blocking their path to her completely. I think she's done talking, Keanu said. His voice wasn't loud. It was low and quiet, but it carried a weight that silenced the younger man's snickering instantly. It wasn't the voice of a movie star, it was the voice of a man who was not going to move. The older man blinked, caught off guard by the calmness. What did you say to me? You heard me, Keanu said. He stood with his hands loose at his sides, completely relaxed, yet looking ready for anything. She's alone. She's tired. And she wants to leave. Why don't you fellas head on out, there's nothing for you here. For a moment, nobody moved. The wind blew a discarded candy wrapper across the concrete, the only sound in the standoff. The dynamic had shifted so drastically it felt like the air pressure had changed. The men were no longer the hunters, they were being hunted. The younger guy in the hoodie shifted his weight, looking nervous. He looked at Keanu, then at the car, then back at his friend. The fun was gone. The easy target was gone. Now they were dealing with a wild card, a stranger who wasn't afraid, who had stepped into the middle of a bad situation without hesitating. Come on, man, the younger guy mumbled, pulling on the older man's sleeve. It's not worth it. Let's just go. The car's empty anyway. The older man hesitated. He looked at Keanu, trying to stare him down, searching for any sign of fear. He found none. Keanu just watched him with those dark, focused eyes, waiting. He didn't blink. He didn't back down an inch. Finally, the older man swore under his breath. Whatever, he grunted, spitting on the ground near Keanu's boot. You're lucky your boyfriend showed up, lady, he shouted toward Maya's car, though there was no power in his voice anymore. It sounded weak, like a last attempt to save face. The two men turned and walked back to their dark sedan. They moved with a slumped, defeated posture, their earlier bravado completely evaporated. They got in, slammed the doors, and started the engine. A moment later, they peeled out of the parking lot, tires squealing, speeding away down the highway without looking back. Maya let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for a lifetime. Her shoulders slumped, and the tension drained out of her body, leaving her feeling shaky and weak. She looked out the window. Keanu was standing in the same spot, watching the tail lights disappear into the distance. He didn't look like a hero celebrating a victory. He just looked like a guy making sure the trouble was actually gone. He turned slowly and walked back toward Maya's car. He wasn't smiling, but the look in his eyes had softened. He approached the driver's side window, where the condensation from her breath had fogged up the glass, and gently tapped on it with his knuckle. "Hey," he said, his voice muffled but kind through the glass. "You doing okay in there?" Maya sat frozen for a moment, her hand hovering over the window button. Her brain was struggling to catch up with reality. Just seconds ago, she had been trapped, terrified, and convinced that something terrible was about to happen. Now, the threat was gone, and standing in its place was a figure she had seen in movies countless times. It felt like a glitch in the Matrix, a dream sequence inserted into a nightmare. She saw his face through the glass, illuminated by the harsh yellow light of the pump. He looked tired, his hair messy from the helmet, but his eyes were alert and filled with genuine concern. He tapped on the glass again, very gently, not demanding entry, just checking in. Taking a shaky breath, Maya pressed the button. The window rolled down with a loud whirring sound. The cold night air rushed into the car, but this time, it didn't feel threatening. It felt cleansing. The smell of gasoline was still there, but mixed with it was the faint scent of leather and fresh air from the open road. "Hey," Keanu said again, leaning down so he was eye level with her. His voice was soft, raspy, and incredibly calm. "You doing okay? Did they touch you? Did they hurt you?" Maya opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She looked at him, really looked at him, searching for any sign that this was a prank or a trick. But there was no camera crew hiding in the bushes. No bright lights or microphones. There was just a man in a leather jacket looking at her with worried eyes. The reality of who he was suddenly crashed over her, mixing with the leftover adrenaline from the scare. I think I'm okay," she managed to whisper, though her voice was trembling so badly it was barely audible. "I didn't know what to do. They blocked me in. I was so scared." Keanu nodded slowly, listening intently. He didn't dismiss her fear or tell her she was overreacting. He didn't pull out his phone to record her. He simply stood there, a solid, grounding presence. "Yeah, I saw," he said, glancing back at the empty road where the sedan had disappeared. "I saw them crowding you. That wasn't right. You did good keeping the doors locked. That was smart." Hearing him say that she did something right helped dissolve the shame she had been feeling. She had been cursing herself for stopping there, for being alone, but he was validating her instincts. "They were banging on the glass," Maya said, a tear finally spilling over and rolling down her cheek. She wiped it away aggressively, angry at herself for crying. "I tried to call 911, but I had no service. I felt so helpless." "It's okay to cry," Keanu said softly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a clean, crumpled white handkerchief. He didn't hand it to her directly, he held it out respectfully, letting her take it if she wanted. "You've had a shock. It's just the adrenaline leaving your body. Give it a minute." Maya took the handkerchief. It was soft, smelled like detergent, and felt incredibly real. She dabbed her eyes, taking a deep, ragged breath. "Thank you," she sniffled. "Thank you for stopping. I think they were about to try to get in." Keanu shook his head, a look of mild annoyance crossing his face, but it wasn't directed at her. "People get bold when they think no one is watching," he said. "They forgot that the world is full of people who aren't going to let that happen." He stepped back slightly and looked at her car, checking the tires and the gas pump. "You got a full tank?" he asked, shifting back into practical mode. "Yes, it just finished when you pulled up, Maya said. Good. That's good, he nodded, satisfied. Do you have far to go tonight? Are you heading home? About another hour, Maya said. To the city. He looked at the darkness of the highway, then back at her. An hour is a long drive when you're shaking like a leaf. Are you sure you're okay to drive? If you feel faint or dizzy, you tell me. We can go sit in the store until you feel better. I just want to go home, Maya admitted. I don't want to be here anymore. I get that, Keanu said. He looked around the gas station one more time, scanning the perimeter like a Secret Service agent, making absolutely sure the men weren't circling back. The coast was clear. The only sound was the wind rustling the trash in the corner of the lot. He turned back to the window and rested his arms on the doorframe, bringing his face closer again. He looked her in the eyes, his expression serious but kind. Here is what we're going to do. You're going to buckle up. You're going to keep your doors locked. You're going to get on the highway and drive straight home. Don't stop for anyone. Don't stop for anything unless it's a police car with flashing lights. Okay. Maya nodded vigorously. Okay. I can do that. I'm going to hang back here for a few minutes, he continued. Just to make sure they don't come back. And I'll follow you up to the on-ramp, just to see you get onto the highway safely. How does that sound? It sounded like the best thing Maya had ever heard. The fear that had gripped her chest was loosening its hold, replaced by a warm sense of gratitude. This man, this stranger who could have been anywhere in the world, was here, taking time out of his life to make sure she got home safe. He wasn't looking for a reward. He wasn't looking for attention. That sounds amazing, Maya said, managing a small, weak smile. Thank you. Really? Keanu smiled back. It was a humble, crooked smile that reached his eyes. Don't mention it, he said. We're all just traveling through, right? We have to look out for each other. He pushed himself off the door frame and stood up straight. He adjusted his jacket and zipped it up against the cold. All right. You start her up. I'll be right here. Maya put the car in gear. The engine purred to life, the sound comforting and familiar. She gripped the wheel, feeling her strength return. She looked at Keanu one last time. He was standing by his motorcycle, holding his helmet, watching her. Hey, she said through the open window before she pulled away. I know who you are. And thank you. Keanu paused, one hand on the handlebar of the bike. He looked a little bit shy, almost embarrassed by the recognition. He just tipped his head, a simple, respectful gesture. Drive safe, darlin', he said. He waited until she had checked her mirrors and signaled. He didn't move until her tires were rolling. He stood there like a guardian statue in the flickering light, watching her back, making sure the darkness didn't come for her again. As Maya accelerated toward the exit ramp, she glanced in her rearview mirror. He was getting on his bike, ready to follow her just far enough to ensure she was on her way. For the first time all night, she wasn't scared of the dark. The tires of her car gripped the asphalt as Maya steered the vehicle up the entrance ramp and merged onto the highway. The bright beams of her headlights cut through the darkness, revealing the white lines painted on the road. Her hands were still gripping the steering wheel a little tighter than necessary, her knuckles white, but the icy knot of fear in her stomach had begun to loosen. The heavy silence that had terrified her earlier was now replaced by the steady hum of the engine and the rhythmic sound of the tires spinning beneath her. She checked the rearview mirror almost instinctively, the habit hard to break after the night she had had. There, about 2 car lengths behind her, was the single, blinding headlight of the motorcycle. It wasn't he aggressive. He wasn't he riding her bumper or trying to pass her. He was just there, a silent guardian floating in the dark. It felt surreal. Here she was, a regular person driving a beat-up sedan, being escorted by a movie star on a motorcycle in the middle of the night. They drove for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. The highway was relatively empty, save for a few heavy trucks rumbling slowly in the right lane. The rhythm of the road, the warmth of the heater inside the car, and the steady presence of the light behind her worked together to finally calm Maya's racing heart. She felt a sense of safety she hadn't felt in hours. Every time she glanced back, that light was there, steady and unwavering. Then, the motorcycle accelerated slightly. It moved smoothly into the left lane, zipped past her with a roar that echoed briefly in the night air, and then took an exit ramp on the right. Maya watched him go. The red tail lights of the bike flashed once as he veered off into the darkness, disappearing on his own path. He was gone. Just like that. He hadn't followed her all the way to her house, which was smart. He knew she was safe now that she was on the main highway with other cars around. He hadn't asked for her number, and he hadn't asked for a selfie. He simply made sure she was okay and then left, returning to his own life. The road ahead was empty again, but it didn't feel lonely anymore. Maya let out a long breath she felt like she'd been holding since the moment those men had stepped out of their sedan. Her mind started racing, trying to process what had actually happened. She thought about the way he stood, the way he spoke, the way he didn't ask for anything in return. There was no camera crew following him. There were no reporters. It was just him, out for a ride, seeing someone in trouble, and deciding to stop. It made Maya think about how easy it is to judge people based on what we see in movies or read in magazines. People talk about celebrities like they are different species, living in a bubble of fame and money, detached from reality. But tonight, Maya had seen the truth. Fame doesn't change a person's heart. In fact, for some people, having the world look at you just makes you want to look back at the world with kindness. The rest of the drive passed in a blur. The familiar exit signs for her neighborhood started to appear, each one bringing a fresh wave of relief. She turned onto her street, which was lined with quiet houses and dark windows. It felt strange to think that her neighbors were all asleep in their warm beds, completely unaware of the drama that had unfolded just a few miles away. The world kept turning, even when yours felt like it was stopping. She pulled into her driveway and killed the engine. For a moment, she just sat in the silence of the car, looking at the dark house. The adrenaline was fully gone now, replaced by a deep, heavy exhaustion. Her limbs felt like they were made of lead. She looked over at the passenger seat. There, lying on the fabric, was the crumpled white handkerchief he had given her. She picked it up, holding the soft cloth in her hand. It was such a small thing, but it was tangible proof that she hadn't imagined it. It really happened. Maya got out of the car, the cool night air brushing against her face, making her shiver. She walked to her front door, her keys jingling in her hand. She unlocked the deadbolt and stepped inside, locking the door behind her and flipping the latch. She leaned her back against the solid wood of the door and slid down until she was sitting on the floor of her hallway. The house was quiet and still. It was just her and the shadows. But for the first time that night, the shadows didn't scare her. She sat there for a long time, just thinking. She realized that she had learned two important lessons tonight. The first was that the world could be a scary place. There were people out there who wanted to hurt you, who wanted to take your peace of mind away just because they could. She couldn't change that, and she couldn't pretend it didn't exist. But the second lesson was more important. In that darkness, there was also light. There were good people. Strangers who would stop when no one else did. People who would use their strength not to intimidate others, but to protect them. Keanu didn't have to stop. He could have driven right past that gas station, put on his music, and gone home. No one would have blamed him. But he didn't. He saw a problem, and he became the solution. Maya stood up slowly and walked into the kitchen. She filled a glass of water and drank it all in one go. She felt tired, incredibly tired, but she also felt incredibly lucky. She was safe. She was home. She went to the window and looked out at the street. It was empty. The night was still and peaceful. Somewhere out there, miles away, a man on a motorcycle was riding through the dark. She hoped he got home safely, too. She hoped he knew how much his small act of bravery meant to her. It wasn't about meeting a celebrity. It was about meeting a human being who reminded her that kindness isn't dead. And sometimes, that reminder is the only thing you need to make it through the night. Maya turned off the lights and headed for bed, ready to finally sleep, leaving the fear behind her in the rearview mirror.